Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about World War II, all right, and the end of World War II. So far you've already learned like the business of World War II, what happens, you've compared and contrasted technological changes. We're going to review some of that towards the end, all right, and then also you've looked at like personal accounts of World War II. You should have looked at those Wednesday and Thursday, the memories of World War II. So now we're going to see how World War II ends. And we also looked at the Holocaust and Nanking. That's the other one I was forgetting. So now we're going to see how World War II ends. And then next week, we're going to start our next sort of project. And this one's going to be a writing one. So next week, you're going to do one prep assignment that's going to count as a class assignment, but you're going to want to take it seriously because it's going to really help you for your actual assessment grade, which will be a writing assignment based off of it. All right, but we'll go more into that next week. Now we really just want to focus on the end of World War II. Okay. So there were two major Allied conferences, meaning conferences where the Allies all get together. And remember, our major Allied forces during World War II are going to be Great Britain, the USSR, which is Russia. Well, okay, kind of. So it's Great Britain, the United States, okay. France is kind of one, but they're occupied by Germany. But once we have D-Day and we're able to take France back, France is able to fully participate as an ally. And then Russia, the USSR, even though they started off a non-aggression pact with the Axis powers, remember Germany turned on them and decided to invade them. And so now the USSR, Russia has joined the Allies, of course. And there are other allied powers as well, but these are our big ones, our important ones, okay? So the Allied powers have conferences towards the end of the war because once they take back France, they start their march towards Germany. And this is really starting to spell the end for your Axis powers. Because at this point, I mean, Italy has largely been taken over and surrendered to the Allies. I mean, for a bit, Germany invades northern Italy to reinstitute Axis power there and reinstitute Mussolini, but eventually they're going to be able to take over northern Italy, and so then they start moving towards Berlin, and the end is nigh. And really also too, by the time once they take back France, I mean, the United States also has been fighting in the Pacific as well, and so they're been slowly island hopping closer to Japan. So they have these conferences saying, all right, we know the end is near. What are we going to do to institute peace once everybody surrenders? Okay. So the first conference is the Yalta Conference. It's February 4th through the 11th, 1945. 1945 is the year that World War II is going to end. So this is plans for world peace. VE Day, victory in Europe isn't yet, okay? So while eventually Italy does surrender, victory in Europe, VE Day, isn't fully secured until Germany will surrender. But this is imminent. They're getting really close to marching on Germany. Okay. So they're like, let's all get together and figure out a plan. Okay. Because the question of this conference is what to do with post war Germany. What do we do with Germany once she surrenders? Because they really want to avoid what happened in World War I. Because certainly they want to punish Germany, especially as they uncover the horrors of the Holocaust. But at the same time, they want to avoid having a poisoned country or a poisoned community in the heart of Europe, which is what they did in World War I. So they're trying to say, how can we punish Germany, but at the same time still allow for a Germany that can recover after World War II? And so they decide that they're going to occupy and divide Germany into four zones. The USA, the USSR, France, and Great Britain will all have four zones which they will occupy. Okay. And they also said we'll have some trials, especially as they march closer and closer to Berlin, Germany's capital. And as they start to liberate these areas, they start to say, oh my God, as they're realizing the Holocaust, they're saying, wow, we really need to hold some sort of trial for all of the war crimes done. Okay. And they're like, you know what? Germany needs to demilitarize again. And this time we're going to like actually hold them to it. And they also say we need a better peacekeeping body because the League of Nations clearly didn't work. So they also start to hash out their plans for the United Nations, which will be their new peacekeeping body. So the Yalta Conference says, here's how we're going to deal with Germany. Here's what we're going to do to hold Germany and other nations for their war crimes. And also, let's replace the League of Nations with the United Nations. So they're saying we'll put all of this in place once Germany surrenders. All right. So, the vision of Germany. This is going to really have a lot to do with the Cold War eventually, because we can see over here that this is Germany, okay? That the United States will have this part, France will have the little blue part, Great Britain will have the green part, and then the USSR will have this part. The problem is the USSR controls the part that has Berlin in it. And the allies, the non-communist allies, are not happy with a communist nation controlling the capital. So they say, all right, fine, USSR, Russia, you get this section, but we're going to divide the capital as well. So even though you have all of northeastern Germany, we're going to divide Berlin. And so even with Berlin, they divide, or even within Eastern Germany, they're dividing Berlin. And so you can see over here, the USSR gets this part, France gets this part, the USA gets that part, and the UK gets this part. So if any of you guys know anything about the Cold War, you may have heard something called the Berlin Wall. We will discuss this more when we go over communism. But the Berlin Wall, there will be a relatively military enforcement here, dividing Eastern Germany with all of the kind of capitalist, away from capitalist parts of Germany. But the Berlin Wall is most famously where the USSR first just kind of creates fortifications and then an actual wall all around West Berlin, because they want to keep people from defecting or fleeing to the parts of Berlin that are controlled by capitalist nations. And we'll get into that more, all right? But we already start this kind of struggle with capitalist versus communism already in the occupation zones of Germany, but in particularly the capital, Berlin. Okay. Ignore that. So, VE Day, Victory in Europe, May 8, 1945. So at this point, Italy has surrendered. They have taken northern Italy away from Germany, and Germany herself has surrendered. So VE Day means now they can actually put into action their plans from the Yalta Conference. So World War II has ended in Europe, and they're dividing Germany, they're creating the United Nations, they're thinking about these Nuremberg trials, etc. But the entirety of World War II still hasn't ended because Japan is your last Axis power fighting. Okay, so they have another conference, Potsdam. Okay, so Potsdam says, what do we do with Japan? And they decide that they want unconditional surrender. They need to get rid of their emperor. They need to fully surrender. All right. And this is where we even start to see even more the hints of the Cold War, because as they start to discuss, sorry, got distracted. As they start to discuss what to do with Japan, their methods, we start to see this tension between the United States and the USSR. And this is also where possibly the United States puts out feelers on the atomic bomb. Okay. So, partway through World War II, FDR had died. Okay. So FDR had died, and Harry Truman had kind of inherited the presidency, but also he inherited the program, which is the atomic bomb. He decides to go through with it. And so allegedly, he casually mentions to Stalin, the premier or the leader of the USSR, and he says allegedly, Harry Truman says, hey, during Potsdam, I casually mentioned to Stalin that we had a new weapon of unusual destructive force. And the Russian premier showed no special interest. All he said was he was glad to hear it and hoped we would make good use of it against the Japanese. So Harry Truman's like, yo, I told the USSR about the atomic bomb. They didn't seem to care. Now, according to a Soviet general, he says that Stalin had been informed, that the United States possessed a bomb of exceptional power, but the United States never said it was the atomic bomb, and it's clear the US government intended to use the atomic bomb as a weapon for the purpose of achieving its imperialist goals from a position of strength in the Cold War. Okay. What we can discern is that it's true the United States mentioned a weapon. And it's true the United States never mentioned that it was specifically an atomic bomb. But we can see, though, that Russia is trying to say, United States, we had no idea, and you were just doing this to like grandstand and get a better position in the Cold War. Which they weren't calling it the Cold War when they were having this meeting. So clearly the Soviet general's point of view is coming after the Cold War had already started. But to be fair, there are some inklings that the United States did use the atomic bomb more to show off to Russia than actually stopping Japanese aggression, because we had been firebombing the crap out of Japan for ages now. So, I mean, what's to say that the atomic bomb actually pushed them into surrendering? Although there are some arguments for that, Japan would have never surrendered without using the atomic bomb because of the cult of the emperor, all right? So, I mean, whether or not you believe that the atomic bomb is necessary is up to you. But we can at least prove, though, that the United States did mention kind of a weapon, but they probably didn't tell the Soviets that it was an atomic bomb. Sources kind of differ on how much the Soviets actually knew. Okay. Regardless, the United States does drop an atomic bomb, two bombs, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The first one is on Hiroshima. It's typically pronounced more, the westernized way of saying it is Hiroshima, but Hiroshima is a more ethnically correct way of saying it. Okay. Little Boy is the name of the atomic bomb, and it was dropped from the plane called the Enola Gay, and it killed 140,000 dead. Plus countless casualties. And then scant days later, another one was dropped on Nagasaki, Fat Man. It was dropped from the plane called Boxcar, and 74,000 were dead, plus countless wounded. So Russia, now that they weren't dealing with Germany, had declared war on Japan. Now, also, all of the other allies are focused solely on Japan, since Germany had surrendered. And depending on your point of view, plus these two atomic bombs being dropped, Japan finally does surrender, all right? And VJ Day is Victory in Japan, and it comes on September 2nd, 1945. And it's at this point that the last Axis